everyone, I'm Night Treasure, and today I'll be talking about my top 24 movies released in 2024. But before we start, I have to say a few disclaimers. First, I'm obviously not a native speaker, so please excuse any mistakes in my pronunciation, grammar or vocabulary. To make things easier, I've added subtitles for you, so please feel free to turn them on. Second, this ranking is purely my personal opinion and I will try to explain it as good as I can. Feel free to comment your own opinion, but in a friendly way please. Third, I will try to make the reviews as spoiler-free as possible, but naturally there can be some spoilers every now and then. Last but not least, I must say that there are some movies of 2024 that I unfortunately have not seen, although they surely would rank high on this list. Please keep that in mind when you're missing a movie. Alright, enough chit chat. Let's jump in. But before we start with the actual list, here's a quick edit of some honorable mentions that I wanted to include.
Sonst hat uns der Herrgott geschickt. Sag mal, Agnes, von wo hast denn du das Kind?
I really didn't know what to expect when I went to watch Des Teufels Bad or The Devil's Bath to use the English title, because when I think of Austrian cinema, the first thing that comes into my mind is slapstick comedy with a funny accent. But this horror movie was the exact opposite. Set in the late 18th century in the Austrian countryside, The Devil's Bath begins with a harrowing sequence. A woman kills an infant, confesses her crime, receives absolution and is then executed. The film then shifts its focus to its main character, Agnes, who is just married and is moving to her husband's village. I can only describe this movie as raw, depressing, uncomfortable and brutally realistic. It takes some time to really get things going, and the first half of the movie is stretched a bit too long, but it all pays off in the end with an incredible climax. Another good aspect would be the breathtaking cinematography, something I didn't expect from a smaller production like this. But beyond its technical merits, The Devil's Bath addresses a dark and thought-provoking topic that expanded my understanding of life in 18th century Europe in ways I hadn't considered before.
She asked me to fuck her in my uniform, then it hit me hard.
Yorgos Lanthimos definitely is a rather controversial director, because his movies are, well, really weird sometimes. His new movie, Kinds of Kindness, is even stranger than previous ones like Poor Things or The Lobster. By now, I would even say that this is the weirdest and most confusing movie I have ever seen, but still, I enjoyed it. Not as much as other Lanthimos movies though. I won't even try to explain the plot because I would fail miserably. Kinds of Kindness did many things that only a few movies managed to do to me. It made my heart beat very fast in some places. It made me think about things I never thought about before, and, most of all, it was a movie where I felt like almost every single shot showed me something I had never seen before. It's a movie that is really hard to compare to other movies and also quite hard to grasp, so if you want to get into Lanthimos, I would rather recommend his other movies.
You will live to regret this, old man.
Sometimes you go to the cinema and you experience a movie that doesn't make you say, yes, this movie was a masterpiece, objectively speaking. But you experience something that touches your heart and just satisfies you on an emotional level. That was exactly how it went for me with War of the Rohirrim, an animated movie that is set in the world of The Lord of the Rings. It is no secret that this movie didn't come out too well, so let me explain. On the one side, I completely enjoyed that movie when I watched it for the first time, and it managed to make me smile wildly and get wet eyes. On the other side, I would say that it is a bit overhated on an objective level. I heard people complain about the animation quality, often comparing it to Ghibli movies. But as someone who certainly has a lot of experience with anime, I can say that the animation of War of the Rohirrim is surely on, if not even above, the standard level of modern animation. Most modern anime would look far worse on the big cinema screen. And comparing it to Ghibli is just nonsense, because Ghibli movies are unique in every way. There also was a lot of criticism about the characters, so let's break that down. The main character, Hela, surely is nothing special and has that the hero who does nothing wrong problem. But as we know from both the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy, a good emotional fantasy story works without an extremely well-written main character. And what I really liked about Hela was that principle of she is a hero, but she isn't mentioned in the tales. As you would expect from a movie from Middle-earth, this one gave us some very lovable side characters, such as Olwyn or Leaf. Another disputed aspect is the main villain Wolf, who is quite different than all Lord of the Rings villains we know. I was surprised by him in a positive way, to be honest. Compared to villains like Sauron or Azog, Wolf feels like a villain with personality, because he isn't just pure evil, and that he makes one wrong decision after the other, what pissed off many fans, was just realistic character writing that showed how much he drowns in his own hatred. Nevertheless, he really could have used a detailed backstory. This is going a bit too long, so to sum it all up, The War of the Rohirrim is not a good Lord of the Rings movie, but surely an enjoyable anime fantasy piece.
Theo! Get off the balcony! Go! Alice? Get!
Alice, what's wrong?
What's wrong? You leave my son on that balcony?
No, I didn't. I was right here. We were playing with Max's toys.
Mother's Instinct is a movie that is rarely talked about, perhaps because it didn't get the best reviews, but I quite liked it. At first, this movie shows two families living in a stereotypical rich neighborhood, but then a certain incident happens and their life is turned upside down. At this point, the movie becomes a psychological thriller. Maybe I'm just impressed too easily, but some scenes of this movie really resonated deeply with me. Mainly because of the great acting performance by Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain. Sure, some acts by certain characters were far from what a normal human being would do, but they added to the movie's suspense and unsettling nature. All in all, an exciting psychological movie.
One full tank of water for half a tank of gasoline. Can't do that, not possible.
And he gets a spike in the nut.
Double the mother's milk and double the hydroponics. Double the spuds. Double the maggot mash and the roach gruel. My boys need all the protein they can get. Please, give him what he wants.
Mad Max Fury Road is surely one of the most thrilling modern action films out there. And in 2024, it got a prequel called Furiosa: A Mad Max Story. This prequel had similar strengths: an atmospheric dystopian world, rapid exciting action, and interesting post-apocalyptic ideas. It successfully captured the vibe of Fury Road while introducing a few fresh ideas. Still, the action was not as good as in the previous movie, because many of the impressive practical effects were replaced by CGI. Anna Taylor-Joy gives a solid performance as young Furiosa, and Chris Hemsworth showed that he can actually act quite well if he is casted right. Although I unfortunately couldn't enjoy his acting to the maximum because I watched the movie in the German dub. I genuinely understand people who put Furiosa in their top 5 movies of the year, but for me personally, I must say that it didn't leave a lasting impression on me, and ultimately it's overshadowed by Fury Road.
I have taken Numidia in your names, that your dominion may eclipse that of every emperor that came before you.
Crown him with laurels, brother.
Moving on to a sequel this time. Gladiator 2 had the daunting task of continuing the legacy of Ridley Scott's iconic Gladiator from 2000, and it did a solid job with that. To say it right in the beginning, I'm neither a huge Ridley Scott fan nor a big Gladiator fan, but I do admit that it's one of his best works and generally a good movie. All in all, Gladiator was just solid. It delivered some well-executed action scenes, an okay protagonist, and a storyline that closely mirrored the original. It also shared some bad aspects with the original movie, like stereotypical dialogues or over-idealizing of historical aspects. Something I have to point out about this movie is the Academy Award-worthy performance by Denzel Washington as Macrinus. To sum up, Gladiator 2 turned out to be quite what I expected, and was a nice cinematic experience, but not really a necessary or special movie.
Right. Straight up, there's no appetite, want or need for boy bands. They died a death. It's all grunge now.
Better Man is one of the most unconventional music biopics out there, because Robbie Williams is portrayed as a CGI monkey. Directed by Michael Gracie, best known for The Greatest Showman, the film takes a bold, highly stylized approach to telling a story. And just like The Greatest Showman, this movie is all about spectacle. It's packed with energetic musical numbers, stunning choreography, and eye-catching visuals. Surprisingly, Robbie Williams as a CGI ape actually works and adds to the film's unique charm. However, the storytelling doesn't always feel as fresh. At times, the film seems to exaggerate an otherwise fairly ordinary story, making it feel more dramatic than it actually is. And while the ending is solid, it could have hit with even more emotional impact. Overall, Better Man is a well-crafted film that turns a relatively straightforward story into a fun and visually engaging cinematic experience.
I'm Alma, by the way.
Alma.
Alma.
Tobias. So sorry, but do we know each other?
Oh. Yeah, no, sorry. I ran you over.
We Live in Time is probably the hardest movie of 2024 to properly judge, at least for me. At its core, the film is a pretty standard love story with a heavy dose of drama, because one of the lovers is battling cancer. What sets it apart is its fragmented storytelling. The scenes are presented out of chronological order, which is definitely an interesting choice. Unfortunately, this approach doesn't feel like it serves a greater purpose. It doesn't add clever transitions or create a truly unique storyline. Instead, it feels like a gimmick, as if the filmmakers were trying to make the movie stand out from being just another romantic drama. That said, the film still has its strengths. It's an emotional roller coaster balancing humor and heartbreak in different scenes, and the performances are very good. Andrew Garfield proves his talent once more, and Florence Pugh showcases sides of her acting that we haven't seen before. The ending ties everything together beautifully. It's both fitting and deeply moving. So while the storytelling might not have lived up to its potential, We Live in Time is still an emotional experience worth watching.
Motherfucker! I world is fucked!
That was weird. I'm much calmer now.
Oh boy, oh boy. I thought I'd grown out of my superhero phase, but Deadpool and Wolverine was fun from start to finish. The chemistry between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman is just great. The self-irony with things like the dispute with Fox or the whole multiverse thing in Marvel was used well, and the Like a Prayer scene gave me goosebumps. There's not much to explain here. Everyone who watched it knows why it works so well, but on the other hand, it remains in its limits as a satirical comic book movie. Look Back was undoubtedly the anime movie of the year 2024. Based on a short but successful manga by Tatsuki Fujimoto, who is best known for Chainsaw Man, this adaptation carried high expectations, and it delivered brilliantly. The story revolves around two young girls who share a passion for drawing manga, despite their vastly different personalities. As time passes, they grow up together and their relationship evolves in touching and unexpected ways. Look Back has that certain beautiful anime movie feeling, a vibe that both live action and Hollywood will never be able to truly replicate. Still, it distinguishes itself from the works of Makoto Shinkai or Studio Ghibli with its own animation style and, most importantly, its unique story. Short but gold is how I would describe this anime movie, and I would recommend it to both anime fans and people who enjoy unconventional bittersweet drama.
I made a list of stuff to buy. We need a few things. Is there anything you want me to get?
Don't think so.
You want to come to the store with me?
Maybe another day. So nice here. I'd like to stay if you don't mind.
No, of course not.
Imagine reuniting with a dear old friend after many years, only to discover that she has cancer. With no one else to turn to, she asks you to join her on a vacation, one that becomes an emotional roller coaster where you learn that she plans to end her life during the trip using illegal pills, without revealing when exactly it will happen. That is the premise of Pedro Almodovar's new film called The Room Next Door. Beyond its unique and deeply poignant story, the movie shines thanks to the exceptional performances of its two leading actresses Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton. Their chemistry breathes life into a narrative that is both oppressive and tender, striking a delicate balance as it explores heavy themes such as cancer, death, parenthood, and even climate change. The color composition is also impressive, and for me it was a movie that gave me much to think about and to remember.
You find me cruel, selfish, and unfeeling? I am. I work without caring what happens to either of us. So go back to the club, bear it all, and stalk the kind of people that you enjoy.
Fine. I will.
Come back when you have more time.
Yes. I saw you change the laws of physics. Could it be the great Caesar Catalina doesn't obey anything, not even T-symmetry?
What did you see?
I feel like the famous director Francis Ford Coppola has a certain curse when it comes to the reputation of his movies. Just like everyone who claims to be a movie enthusiast has to like The Godfather, it now seems that everyone who claims to be a movie enthusiast has to dislike Megalopolis. But you know what? I don't care. Megalopolis might not be a masterpiece, but it's surely not as bad as many people say. First of all, no one can deny the stunning visuals in this film, as well as almost all of the acting performances. I understand why some might criticize the heavy-handed symbolism of the Roman Empire and the frequent use of quotes from famous poets. These elements don't feel as groundbreaking in today's cinematic landscape. In fact, I believe Megalopolis might have been better received if it had been released a decade or two earlier. My favorite part of the movie was the arena sequence, probably one of the best single sequences I saw in 2024. Megalopolis did not feel like a Coppola movie at all, and it felt like a weird mix of old-fashioned writing and modern visuals at times, but it was a good movie with a lot of passion behind it.
I have seen things in this world that would have made Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb. We have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science. I have wrestled with the devil as Jacob wrestled the angel in Penuel, and I tell you, if we are to tame darkness, we must first face that it exists.
Nosferatu was actually my first encounter with the visionary modern horror director Robert Eggers, so I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. Typically, I'm neither a fan of monster horror nor particularly drawn to vampire stories. I also haven't seen the original German Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror from 1922. But Eggers' Nosferatu delivered a form of horror that felt like pure art. The stunning visuals alone make this movie worth watching. While the story isn't particularly groundbreaking, I don't see that as a downside, because it aligns well with the film's homage to the original. The cast delivers outstanding performances, including Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who surprised me with his depth in his role, and of course Willem Dafoe, who is always a highlight. Bill Skarsgård's portrayal of Count Orlok was likely good too, but unfortunately I watched the German dub and his voice sounded so much like Till Lindemann, the singer of Rammstein, that it was hard to take him seriously. As for the storyline, the build-up could have been executed more effectively, but the film's final act was so extraordinary that it more than made up for any earlier shortcomings. In the end, Nosferatu is a masterful blend of traditional and modern horror.
When I first saw Joker, when I saw you and Murray Franklin, the whole time I was watching, I kept thinking, I hope this guy blows his brains out.
Joker Folie à Deux is already one of the most overhated movies of all time, thanks to social media. But I won't waste time complaining about this problem, so I'll just move on with my actual thoughts about the movie. Let's start with the points where I agree or partially agree with the haters. Obviously, the sequel is by far not as good as the original Joker movie, but I honestly don't get why you would even expect that, because the ending of Joker surely left a possibility for more content, but not an open pathway to a new franchise. To continue, I also agree that the movie could have used more scenes that deal with how society reacts to the whole situation. And I agree that there were a bit too many music sequences in the picture, although they generally were good and artful. And last but not least, I agree that Joker Folie à Deux genuinely had the potential to be better. But now, let me explain why it still is a good film in my opinion. First of all, it takes over some strengths from the original movie, including an amazing cinematography, a unique and deeply psychological soundtrack, as well as an amazing acting performance by Joaquin Phoenix, this time accompanied by an evenly great one by Lady Gaga. I heard a lot of complaint about the plot being kind of a reset to the beginning of the original movie, and I can understand that, but I would say that this is just realistic. Spoiler warning for Joker. Sure, in the end of the original movie, Arthur seemed to be about to start a revolution, but the opening sequence of Joker Folie à Deux showed us how he suffered and got treated in jail. Keeping that in mind, I can completely understand why he loses his confidence, leading to the genius "there is no Joker" scene. This movie is, in some ways, a middle finger to all comic book fans, I get that. But that makes it an even more unique psychological drama, and if you want to see a comic book accurate Joker, there are still other options like The Dark Knight. The same goes for Harley Quinn. Of course she isn't a comic book accurate Harley, but she works well as a figure in the psychodrama, and the chemistry between Gaga and Phoenix is completely believable. The last thing I want to talk about is the ending, which was great in my opinion. During the trial sequence there certainly was some recycling of the original movie, but the final scene of Joker Folie à Deux was just great, raw and unexpected. I really hope that the reputation of this movie changes in a few years or decades, because I have rarely seen a movie being treated so unfairly by both the audience and the critics.
What a wonderful day! What a wonderful day! Are we thankful for the words of Caesar? We are thankful. Do we bend our heads? We bend. Say his words. Say his words! What a wonderful day!
Let's talk about a movie that often seems to be missing from the best of 2024 lists. Few would argue against the idea that the modern Planet of the Apes trilogy is one of the finest examples of blockbuster cinema from the past 2 decades. In 2024, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes marked the beginning of a new trilogy, set decades after Caesar's death. In this new chapter, the dynamic between humans and apes has flipped, much like in the original Planet of the Apes films from the 70s. Apes now dominate the Earth, while human civilization lies in ruins. The story follows Noah, a young ape on a mission to rescue members of his clan who have been enslaved by a tyrannical ruler. While this film isn't as dark or emotionally gripping as the standout moments of the previous trilogy, it delivers a refreshing narrative with new, lovable and intriguing characters and ideas. The CGI and cinematography were just as spectacular as expected, making it a visually stunning experience. Particularly in the later parts of the movie, we were treated to some genuinely thrilling and emotional scenes. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is one of those films where you step into the cinema and walk out satisfied, having received exactly what you hoped for, a solid and engaging blockbuster.
Whiskey! I don't want to dilute the medicinal value. You what?
Neurofibromatosis has been a topic in film at least since Lynch's sensitive The Elephant Man. But A Different Man really takes a different approach at the theme than what you would expect. This movie, which you could probably call quite Kafkaesque, is about Edward, an unsuccessful actor suffering from NF who tries a new invented healing technique that makes him look completely normal. He changes his name and pretends that Edward died so he can start a new life. But things quickly get turned upside down when he finds out that his former neighbor, a playwright, is casting for a play called Edward. At this point, the movie reveals its true face and eventually it ends up being about itself in some way. If I had to describe this film in one word, it would be interesting. A Different Man wasn't necessarily the most enjoyable movie of 2024, nor was it a true work of art or a masterpiece, but it was undoubtedly one of the most unique films of the last few years. It has a sense of humor that I can't quite put into words, an entirely unpredictable plot, and a completely distinct vibe. And of course, as someone who only knew Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier from Marvel, his performance was a real surprise. After all this praise, I do have to mention that the climax came a bit too early and the ending could have been better in my opinion. This is one of the few films that could have benefited from a longer duration. Still, if you enjoy quirky satire and want to see something totally different, this one is definitely for you.
These are yours, yes?
Yes.
All of them?
The Brutalist was brutally long, but also brutally monumental, brutally well crafted, and brutally impressive. In this biopic about the fictional Hungarian architect László Toth, who flees Europe in the 1940s to start anew in the USA, director Brady Corbett delivers a modern epic that reflects on both historical and contemporary issues while telling a life story that feels like it could be based on true events. Yes, The Brutalist is longer than it needs to be, and I felt it lost some momentum in the second half. But thanks to its varied scenes, distinctive visual style, sharp dialogue, and outstanding performances by Adrian Brody, Guy Pearce and Felicity Jones, it never stopped being engaging. While the emotional peaks weren't as intense as one might expect, every scene had something to offer, especially in the first half. For me, the highlight were the brilliantly crafted exchanges between the protagonist and Pearce's character, Harrison Lee Van Buren, a wealthy businessman who hires him. As Van Buren himself puts it in the film, these conversations were truly intellectually stimulating. In the end, The Brutalist stands as an ambitious, thought-provoking work of art that will be remembered as one of 2024's major cinematic achievements.
I'm Bird. Who are you?
It's none of your business.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
What is?
They.
Continuing with one of the more underrated movies of 2024, Bird by Andrea Arnold tells an atmospheric and deeply modern coming-of-age story filled with heavy themes. The main character, Bailey, amazingly played by newcomer Nikia Adams, is at odds with her father, portrayed in yet another strong performance by Barry Keoghan, because he plans to marry a new girlfriend he's only known for 3 months. On top of that, Bailey has to deal with her mother's abusive new boyfriend, fearing for the safety of her 3 younger siblings. Caught in this difficult situation, she meets an odd fellow named Bird, who is searching for his parents. What makes this movie stand out for me is the perfect balance between peaceful atmospheric moments and raw, emotionally charged scenes filled with anger and frustration. The handheld camera work is used masterfully, making the film feel almost like it was shot on a mobile phone, adding to its intimacy and realism. The dialogue, acting and set design all feel completely natural, drawing the audience into Bailey's world and making her social environment feel authentic. But in the end, I love Bird for being honest and modern. It just missed my top 5 because the final conclusion wasn't as strong as it could have been.
Look at this shit. We'd probably live here if the war didn't happen. Isn't that fucking crazy to think about? Seriously, like, we think of ourselves as these like very American creations, you know? And I guess that we are. I guess that's like the essence of America. People created from other cultures, but like in some parallel black hole universe, you and I are Polish and we probably got like long beards and we can't shake hands with women.
Yeah, that's funny. You know, every time I see like one of those Hasidic guys on the street, I always just think like, there, but for the grace of no God, go I, you know?
What?
Oh, nothing. It's just like a dumb joke.
Now we're getting into the movies that I'd consider really good, making it even harder to rank them. Let's start with A Real Pain, the first major directorial success from well-known actor Jesse Eisenberg. The film follows 2 cousins who travel to Poland on an organized tour to explore Jewish history and learn more about their recently deceased grandmother's past. As the story unfolds, we gradually discover the deeper layers of these 2 characters, who are beautifully written in a strikingly human and realistic way and brought to life by amazing performances from Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg himself. What starts as a film filled with good humor slowly transforms into something much more profound. By the later scenes, the laughter fades, leaving moments of silence that evoke deep emotions. A Real Pain masterfully deals with oppressive themes without ever losing its balance and is rounded off by a not perfect but interesting ending.
You should be careful, Thomas. Your own ambition has not gone unnoticed. This might be seen as a tactic to blacken the name of a rival.
Well, that's a despicable accusation.
Is it? I wonder if you really are so very reluctant to have the chalice passed to you. I shall pretend this conversation never took place.
Conclave shows how an absolutely simple plot can be turned into a thrilling experience if you use the right techniques. The new movie by All Quiet on the Western Front director Edward Berger tells a fictional but utterly realistic story of a conclave, the procedure to elect a new pope. As someone who has some sort of connection with the European Catholicism, it was already a pretty interesting thought to see a story like that in the cinema. And to what Berger made out of that, I can just say wow. First of all, the cinematography was certainly there and the whole atmosphere really made you feel like you would be one of the cardinals. Then, of course, Ralph Fiennes used another chance to prove how good of an actor he is. But the side cast is not to be left out too. The best aspect about Conclave is for sure its character constellation. Every single side character has its purpose, no matter whether to contribute to the suspense or to tell a certain message. The ending of the movie is just completely unpredictable and kind of philosophical. Something I deeply respect about this movie is how the modern Catholic Church is portrayed. Many movies, especially from Hollywood, tend to criticize the church completely, which can be good if it is performed right, but often just unnecessary. On the other hand, it would be for sure wrong to display it as something perfect. Conclave finds the perfect balance between these 2 extremes. It shows the problems of the modern Catholic Church in a subtle way, offering a differentiated view on the different facets in the Vatican. Speaking of that, 2 certain speeches by the characters Lawrence and Benitez manage to contain so many important messages in so few words. All I can say to Conclave is thumb up.
Sir? Just what? Just what? You know what? What? Just please. Just please. Sir, please. Sir. Yes. Just speak. Let me. We're American journalists. You told me that already. Okay. We work for Reuters. Reuters doesn't sound American. Okay, it's a news agency. I know what Reuters is. Sir, okay. I'm just saying. Just saying. Just what? We're American. Okay. Okay. What kind of American are you?
I must say, I've grown to be a big fan of Alex Garland, especially as a director. He has a unique talent for using elements of sci-fi and fantasy to craft visually stunning stories with profound meaning. His new movie, Civil War, however, is unlike anything he's ever done, and unlike anything anyone has ever done. This movie is kind of post-apocalyptic, but in a depressingly realistic way. As the title suggests, it takes place during a civil war in the United States. What makes it so intriguing is that we never learn much about the parties involved in the conflict, leaving the audience to fill in the blanks with their imagination. The main characters are a team of journalists who try to get through to the president and document everything they see, turning the plot into some kind of a suicide road trip thing. That is the point where many haters of the movie call it boring, but I'd say that the slow pace of the movie, especially in the first half, is a decent portrayal of the physical and emotional journey the characters are going through. But although the two leading figures, a legendary journalist veteran and a motivated newcomer, are well written and there is a good chemistry, the best aspect about Civil War is its importance regarding the current political situation in the US and other countries. The movie has an extremely unique way of delivering various political messages. It neither shoves them down the audience's throat, nor do you have to watch the movie 5 times to get them, and there is plenty of room for interpretation with most of them. And pulling such a move in modern times is just pure genius in my opinion, because it's the right balance. Civil War doesn't beat one over with its meaning like some other modern movies tend to do, but it delivers enough artistically covered meaningful material to make those think who are willing to. And last but not least, what kind of an American are you? Scene was probably the scene with the most tension of the year. The Substance is one of those few movies where for me it felt like every single shot of the whole thing got burned into my brain. Even several days after watching it, I had the soundtrack in my ears and the pictures were running through my head. In The Substance, a former famous actress has to earn her living by doing some kind of workout TV show, but she gets fired because she's not young and beautiful anymore. Then she finds out about a way to create a better version of herself by using a dubious service called The Substance, allowing her to switch to her younger self every second week. That interesting principle is executed in the best way possible. This movie is modern, this movie is fast, this movie feels like an artistical drug trip and so much more. It manages to be a perfect satire, perfect body horror and a perfect psychodrama all at once. The contrasting performances by Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley are both so incredible that I can't even decide which one is more Academy Award worthy. The only bad thing I can say about this movie is that the climax was a bit too over the top in my opinion. But that was made up by the final scene and the rest of the movie. The Substance shows what you can do with modern cinema if you do everything right.
It was really weird. Super weird.
Like,
he kept like
weird.
Yeah, like he was like Indian Jeffrey Dahmer, and he kept like rubbing my leg in a circle like that.
Some movies on this list are pure cinematic art, some bring refreshing new ideas to the industry, and some captivate with an exciting plot. But Anora is something far too few films manage to be. It's honest and it's real. The story revolves around a sex worker in New York who meets the son of a wealthy Russian family. He becomes infatuated with her and they begin to date. While the premise might sound basic and unoriginal, Anora takes this setup and uses it in the best way possible. The first third of the movie isn't anything particularly groundbreaking, but then something happens that shifts the tone and style entirely. From that moment on, Anora becomes something truly unique. It seamlessly balances humor and drama, making you laugh out loud while simultaneously tugging at your heartstrings. What makes this film exceptional is how human its characters feel. Only few movies achieve such a genuine depiction of people and their flaws, and the ending scene is undoubtedly the best of the year. Honestly, it's hard to describe why this movie is so great, so I wholeheartedly advise you to check it out for yourself. I know this is anything but a rare opinion, but I don't mind. Not saying that Dune Part 2 is the best movie of the year for me would simply be straight up lying. Villeneuve showed us what you can do with a modern sci-fi blockbuster if you execute it right. Dune Part 2 isn't just the modern equivalent of The Empire Strikes Back. It's a reminder of what true cinematic experiences can be. While the first part from 2021 already excelled in cinematography and soundtrack, the second one brings the much needed improvements in storyline and tension, creating a richer and more gripping narrative. There's not much I can add that hasn't already been said by critics, fans and social media creators. Most important to me is that Dune Part 2 reminded me and many other people that the cinema hasn't died yet, and that there is no way to get a better movie experience than on the big screen. So thank you for that, and thank you all for watching this video. Oh damn, this is gonna be hard. I must say, I've grown to be a big fan of Alex Garland. What the Anna Taylor-Joy gives a solid performance as young Furiosa. First of all, it takes over some strengths from the first. The cast delivers outstanding performances, including The cast delivers outstanding performances, including Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who surprised me with his depth Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who surprised me with his depth in his depth. Oh, I hate this fucking word, man.